Assalamu alaikum Lila. I'm Miriam Morales. In 2009, I started my own business while I was married. I did this to bring in extra income in order to cover expenses while juggling the kids. Like many, I started doing social media management for small businesses, offered a free trial, and if they liked it, they'd stay on with me for a monthly retainer. Alhamdulillah, it grew slowly until I landed a decent sized retainer with a clinical franchise. We'll call them Medics& Co. The owner, a practicing clinician, handed me a few branches to cover. I ran their Facebook ads, promoted specials, wrote copy, all while bouncing a toddler on my hip and answering messages in between diaper changes. It was crazy, especially in 2010. I was on call with the owner of Medics& Co., an informal business meeting, and suddenly my 3-year-old son, who we're going to call Khidr, came towards me. He had just gotten a diagnosis for his condition. While having this professional call, he stabbed me in the leg with a butter knife. Yes, a butter knife. I screamed, dropped the phone. He wasn't trying to hurt me out of malice, but I was his full-time carer, and he had no access to appropriate schooling. The hospital hadn't placed him on any waiting lists, and I couldn't afford private intervention. His father worked remotely, but his job meant I had to keep our son away from him at all times. Quiet, out of his workspace, out of trouble, except Khidr was like a live wire. I was working on my laptop, getting smacked in the face with bottles, strangled with cords, headbutted, or smothered with pillows. He was like that butler in Pink Panther. You know the one, always attacking Inspector Clouseau for training. That was my daily life, except it wasn't a movie and there was no off button. I was constantly putting out fires, dragging Khidr off his sibling, cleaning up poop messes before someone got pink eye, fixing the curtain he yanked off the rail. My eye was twitching, my heart would cramp from stress, but I got the job done. The marriage crumbled and buckled under too many challenges. We split, expenses doubled. I was now juggling solo my Tasmanian devil of a son who was also a graffiti artist. But I found a creche that at least gave me half a day where Hida was doing well. I could focus during that time, work. I sent leads to branches, dealt with complaints, and tightened their online presence. The owner of Medics& Co. initially told me the ads were working, but later informed me they weren't. The company had over 20 branches, yet the advertising budget only covered 4. He eventually brought in another company to build a better website and take over Google Ads. However, both the Google and Facebook ad budgets remained limited. Eventually, things plateaued. Then the owner decided to revamp the Facebook strategy and bring in a virtual assistant to handle lead responses and do online estimates on behalf of the clinicians. At this point, my role evolved from basic social media management into virtual assistance. I began spending more time engaging with clients while also juggling other work to make ends meet, all while caring for my children, one of whom had a condition. During this time, I was extremely busy. I directed all leads to the appropriate branches, provided clients with the information they needed, handled complaints, and helped resolve issues for existing clients. I also worked on strengthening the company's online presence, a major task given the number of clinics and the fact that various pages and sites had already been set up by others. During the school holidays, I was invited by the owner of the company to join him and his inner circle at his home. This arrangement was convenient for me as I could bring along my special needs child, Khidr. While Khidr didn't directly play with the doctor's many children, he moved around near them while they were supervised in a separate room by a nanny. At the meeting, I was questioned about the leads. Despite my consistent efforts, there were doubts about whether the leads I was sending to the clinics were actually being booked. I was handed the unrealistic task of following up on these bookings myself. In response, I suggested organizing a larger staff meeting to offer training and improve the process. The owner agreed, but also made a remark that even though I had only one child, Khidr was like 4 kids in one. At that time, I had taken Khidr out of the creche to potty train him and couldn't afford to pay someone to nanny him for the day. As a result, I had no choice but to bring him with me to the training session. I had prepared my speech and lesson, But Khidr insisted on standing beside me throughout, distracting me completely. I ended up cutting my session short and took him into another room until the event concluded. The owner was unhappy with how the training session turned out, but didn't clearly express what his issues were to the rest of the team, who were also in the dark box. I apologized for my part, and while he said he understood my situation, the support I needed was never provided. In hindsight, he had hired me for a dual role as both virtual assistant and social media manager at a rate that was 40% below the industry standard, while still expecting extra responsibilities without proper structure or assistance. Yes, I could have brought in additional income from the other businesses or clients, but realistically, when? I had effectively become an employee without a formal contract, only a loose agreement, while the workload kept growing. I continued juggling multiple online consulting projects while trying to keep up with the flood of leads sent to the various branches. Each inquiry involved lengthy conversations, quoting estimates, answering follow up questions, and resolving general issues, so my days were packed from dawn to dusk. To cope, I built an efficient system that triaged new leads and saved time, all while potty training Khidr. Unfortunately, this was peak season. Emergencies surged just as many staff members went on holiday. On top of everything, I had to wash soiled clothes and bedding continuously. One day, water pooled on the patio. I slipped, fell, and was badly bruised, taking days to recover. Amid this chaos, the owner of Medics & Co. scheduled a meeting run by a man who introduced himself as a business analyst with a newly hired HR representative in tow. Because I still couldn't afford childcare, Khidr had to come with me again. The format was a round table. Each person shared their highs, lows, strengths, and weaknesses. Although my official role was a junior level virtual assistant handling some social media channels, I was questioned as if I were the marketing and media manager. I owned my struggles, most of which could have been solved by a fair pay rise, and even praised the owner for his charitable initiative he often mentioned. My compliments, however, seemed to inflate his ego. Whether he misunderstood the scope of my work, suspected I was taking advantage, or simply equated humility with weakness, his attitude shifted. Whatever the reason, the disconnect between responsibility and remuneration and the lack of practical support remained unsolved. I finally got Khidr potty trained and enrolled him in a private school, one that drained me financially. Still, I believe that with him in school full time, I could grow my business and raise more income. Around this time, I was given performance targets and asked to assist with damage control in addition to my usual responsibilities of handling estimates, boosting ads for specials, and client queries. The owner began requesting that I visit certain branches in person, some of which were a 45-minute drive away. I spent most of the day at these branches engaging with staff while managing other tasks from my phone. With the owner's permission, I used part of the marketing budget to cover Uber fares, as I still hadn't received a pay increase, even while my living costs continued to rise. A third of my total income was going straight to Khidr's school fees and his transport. The owner was fully aware of my financial situation. I repeatedly made it clear that I was willing to take on additional work for additional pay. Instead, there was a constant expectation that I prove myself first. He dangled the possibility of appointing me as media marketing manager, but only if I met all my targets. So rather than expanding my own business or onboarding new clients, I committed my focus entirely to meeting Medic & Co.'s needs. The so-called business analyst advised me to pause any major marketing efforts until he sorted out the branches. I complied, met all the targets within 3 months, and then contacted the owner to formalize the arrangement and request a contract. I followed up with a new HR representative who vaguely acknowledged it and said he'd look into it. But ultimately, nothing ever came of it. I took my son out of his school because the fees were crippling me, By Allah's grace, I soon found a far cheaper school, only 3 minutes walk from home. The head teacher knew so much about his condition that she even lectured on it at the university. At work, I had hit a ceiling with Medics & Co. and decided not to pour any more effort when there was clearly no future there. That didn't mean I was idle. Every day I spent at least an hour handling complaints, investigating, then calming clients with workable solutions. I created and managed paid media specials and put together the marketing strategy. Because the budget was tiny, I partnered with another IT marketing firm to grow our online presence organically. It worked. WhatsApp leads kept rising. Head office, however, insisted I spend extra time capturing data to prove the results, while they paid me the same rate I'd had since 2011. Eventually, the so-called business analyst, let's call him Dud, summoned me to a branch for a meeting with HR. He tried to strong-arm me with a quote he had obtained from another company. For context, 2013 prices, role of service, what I was paid, virtual assistant, medical consulting, damage control, HR, social media management, all branches and queries, 6,500 Rand. Facebook and Google Ads Management, 3,000 Rand. Total me, 9,500 Rand. The assisting IT marketing firm charged 4,200 Rand. So the entire marketing budget, including my VA salary, was 13,700 Rand. Dud claimed a top-tier agency would do all of that plus a VA call center website, Google Ads, and every social platform for just 4,500 Rand. It sounded absurd, so I asked for their contact details, which he reluctantly gave. All while he criticized me for working from bed on WhatsApp and moaned about missing stats. Remember, he was the one who had earlier told me to slow down on marketing efforts. Now he wanted me to speed up because the company is bleeding money. When I pointed out that I had no employment contract or even a service delivery agreement, despite asking for one, he could barely meet my gaze. He told the new HR officer to draft an SDA for me and hurried out. I never did receive that service delivery agreement, but I did secure the actual quote from the agency Dud bragged about. Their fee was 45,000 Rand, not 4,500 Rand. Dud had simply lopped off a zero. The agency added that competitors in our sector were spending at least 15,000 Rand a month on Google Ads alone, and they were stunned by our owner's expectations. At the next meeting, I produced the real figure. Dud dodged the issue, saying he needed tangible data before he could act. Fine, so did I. If I was meant to operate as a marketing strategist while earning a junior VA wage, the owner agreed the ads were working, but told me to manage the IT and marketing team better and announced I'd now report to a newly promoted operations manager. Translation: work like a marketing head, continue to get paid like an entry-level VA. I was already supporting other clients to keep food on the table, parenting a special needs child who was home early, pulling me away from work every few minutes, acting as customer service ninja, fielding queries, calming complaints, delegating to branches, mostly from my phone, while cooking, cleaning, and breaking up sibling brawls. Now they expected hours of extra headspace to mine branch statistics and draft new strategies just to prove the marketing was working and maybe earn a raise. While rescuing one branch's Facebook page from suspension, I fell for a fake Facebook message. The scammers hijacked my main profile. My ads account was held hostage as well. With help from our IT media partners and my own clients who still had access, I recovered control and opened fresh profile to safeguard the ad budgets. Total downtime, about 10 days. Dad, in full big business costume, demanded to know why the numbers weren't ready. I reminded him I had just cleaned up a cybercrime to protect the company. The reports came to him a few days later. He never responded. He punted them to HR, who couldn't interpret them without my hand-holding. Bottom line, as confirmed by the IT media team, We were steadily growing the company's online presence on a shoestring budget. What I really needed to demonstrate ROI, return on investment, was up-to-date data on each branch's capacity and footfall, plus a proper contract, a defined role, and pay that matched the work. I had been discussing a more effective lead tracking funnel with the IT and media team, and had also spoken to the new operations lead about this and other plans. We agreed to meet in person at the branch near the local mall. It was nearing the end of the school year, so I had no choice but to bring my son along. At this point, I was still doing extra work again with no raise while juggling motherhood. He had recently developed a strange but temporary phobia of clinics and pharmacies. The moment we arrived at the medical center, he refused to enter. I put my bag down for a moment and he bolted. He ran out of the mall across a dry open field, heading toward a squatter camp where there was a fire. I chased him, my chest pounding. When I caught up, he flung himself onto the sandy ground and refused to budge. A few homeless people, some clearly high, stood nearby watching. I was exhausted, grasping for air and trying to lift a child in full meltdown mode. He wouldn't move. I gave up. Then suddenly, in the middle of his emotional storm, he brightened and chirped, "Ice cream?" Still breathless, I said, "Yes, let's go get ice cream." As I struggled to catch my breath, a stranger asked why I wasn't holding his hand. I ignored her. It wasn't her business. I ducked into the branch to quickly grab my bag, only for him to run off again. Thankfully, bystanders pointed me in the right direction. I finally caught up to him and took him to the nearest family steakhouse. I needed somewhere, anywhere, that would keep him contained and calm. I called the operations manager and asked her to meet me there instead. We had our meeting over a table while he ate his ice cream. Another family sat next to us and gently offered understanding. They also had a child on the autism spectrum and suggested I try tissue salts. It was an unexpectedly comforting exchange. Eventually, we finalized a revised strategy with the IT media team, though it would come at a slightly higher cost. We prepared to justify the spend in a meeting with the owner. But then I was told to put everything on hold. The holiday season was starting. Branches were closing and the owner was heading off on vacation. That summer was rough. Many branches were closed, others had limited hours, and I was left juggling emergency cases while also trying to promote locations where staff were unreliable, disappearing mid-shift, and dropping leads. On top of it all, I had other work and my son to take care of. By January, I was completely drained. Meanwhile, everyone else was returning from their holidays, including the owner and his wife. She messaged me out of the blue to take on an extra task, placing newspaper ads. I was hesitant. I didn't have the capacity, and I certainly wasn't willing to do even more work for peanuts. She didn't seem to understand or care. At the same time, my son had just started at a new inclusive school, but he couldn't attend without me physically sitting in class with him. I told head office I was available to work virtually, but phone calls would be difficult. Most client interactions were happening on WhatsApp anyway. We just managed to arrange a nanny when the owner suddenly and angrily insisted that I come into head office. What he didn't know was that I was already in the process of applying for another job, one that paid decently, only required in-person attendance twice a week, and gave clear, achievable targets. That possibly was in the back of my mind as he sat across from me, berating me. He claimed the marketing wasn't working. He said he didn't want gradual growth, and insisted that even the meager salary I was being paid was too much. He ranted about the fact that I hadn't placed newspaper ads, was vague about what targets he actually wanted, and made the absurd claim that he could drive a flood of traffic to a single branch using the same Google Ads budget via a newspaper ad that had split across 25 branches. He demanded to know how many leads came in for one branch back in November. I didn't have the number offhand, and he snapped that as head of marketing, I should know this. That left me stunned. When was I ever made head of marketing? Then he asked HR to leave the meeting so he could tell me privately that the real reason he didn't want to invest in me was because I had too many personal problems, meaning my child. I replied that a higher salary could have solved that. Private school, better care, the help I needed, but he wasn't interested. Instead, he ranted about how he hated excuses. Then, as if that wasn't enough, he began bad-mouthing the signage guy, expressing anger that the man had delayed an installation because his sister had died and attended her funeral. At that point, I was disgusted. I told him plainly that I didn't approve of what you were saying. From an Islamic standpoint, he had no right to speak about the signage guy like that. I tried to defend myself by listing all the work I'd done. Now I'd even covered for him while he was away, but he cut me off. Wouldn't let me speak. Finally, he threw me out with a curt, "No, I'm fighting with staff today, just leave." What a pig. From this point, I'll call him Dr. Khinzir. The next day I messaged him hoping he'd cool off. He had. I reminded him of his actual budget, something he had completely lost touch with. Since he wanted a flood of leads for one branch, I asked whether he wanted the entire boosting budget to go there, as it was currently being spread too thin across other branches. But then he got distracted. Fresh from Umrah and high on performative piety, he asked me to add the Kalimat Shahada to his logo. I didn't object, though I did think it would be more meaningful if it was written on his heart and reflected in his actions. After all his tantrums and superficial religiosity, it became clear his Umrah wasn't for Allah SWT, it was for his ego. So after Umrah, Dr. Khinzir suddenly wanted the Kalimat Shahada on his logo. But the secular IT and media company he hired talked him out of it. One of them pulled me aside and asked, why did he come back from Saudi so hot-headed and now suddenly he wants Islamic decorations on his branding? To them it seemed like extremism, and honestly, can you blame them? I couldn't gossip about my boss, but I also couldn't let them walk away with the wrong impression of Islam, so I chose my words carefully. I told them most Muslims come back from Hajj or Umrah softer, more gracious, more grounded. After such a spiritually intense journey, I'm not sure what happened in this case. And I left it at that. Then came the infamous fun day he organized for all the branches at the beach. I didn't go. I had no intention of pretending I was part of that team, and honestly, I was too busy. Still holding the fort as always. Behind the scenes, I continued working with the IT and media guys on funnels. I was still handling general admin, marketing over 20 branches with near non-existent budget, and somehow the workload kept growing. Meanwhile, Dr. Khinzir got worse. More arrogant, more publicly disrespectful. He would put me down in meetings, treat me like a digital waitress, and expect work done late in the evenings. Then I found out something infuriating. The staff weren't even booking the leads I generated. When I confronted them, they ignored me. I was just the VA, not management. What mattered to them was getting commission on 5-star reviews, which, let's be honest, could easily be faked with bots, so he was paying them for nothing. And me? He paid me a low-entry virtual assistant's wage, but expected the output of an entire marketing department. That meant I was the media strategist, the content creator, the campaign manager, the copywriter, the social media scheduler, the analytics tracker, the client responder, and sometimes even HR. Imagine walking into a restaurant paying 40% for a starter, then demanding the full main course for free, plus dessert and coffee every 5 minutes, and expecting it all to be hot, perfect, and immediate. That's what it felt like. And to put it in perspective, his competitors were spending 5 times more just on Google Ads for one branch than what he allocated for all 25 of his branches combined. I was managing the visibility of 25 clinics on less than the ad budget of one, and still results were expected on demand. His wife would call and hold me up for half an hour. Operations pestered me every day. Staff would call, message me constantly needing help. Doctors contacted me directly for new ads or to complain about useless staff. I was still handling content quotes, admin, and customer complaints all at once. I was again that digital waitress. At everyone's beck and call, morning to night of the truth, I'd become a slave, working for free, underpaid, overused. Whether they were doing it on purpose to block me from finding other work or just so self absorbed they didn't care how much they were wrecking my life. Either way, the situation was getting out of hand. At this point, it wasn't just emotional, it wasn't just economic. Islamically, it was unethical. There was no clear contract, no written agreement, no renewal of terms, not even a review. Since 2011, 3 years prior, the work grew, the responsibilities multiplied, the expectations expanded, but the compensation stayed exactly the same. And in that gap between what I gave and what I was given, my time was stolen. My effort was taken without consent, and that, in the language of fiqh, is thulm. In our deen, the deen of truth and justice, this wasn't just bad business. It was a breach of trust. It was exploitation, not just of a worker, but of a woman in a vulnerable position. I know my Islamic rights. Yes, maintenance covers the basics, but it doesn't cover therapy. It doesn't cover private education. It doesn't cover what it actually costs to raise a special needs child in a broken system. As a single mother, I felt increasingly resentful. I didn't have the time or the space to seek more income, not without neglecting my child, who already needed more of me than I could give. Eventually, I applied for another VA role with a company in the States. It's more than possible that the background noise, the ruckus caused by my child, sabotaged that interview. But that experience lit a fire. It pushed me to rebrand, to rebuild, to revive my own little business that had stalled. Somehow I was going to find income elsewhere. Somehow I was going to create space for healing and growth. But in the meantime, they assumed I was desperate. They assumed I'd take anything, that I'd stay quiet, be grateful for crumbs because I needed the money. And yes, I did need the income. But here's what they didn't get. Islam does not condone this. It doesn't honor exploitation dressed up as opportunity. It doesn't excuse injustice just because the victim had no choice. I'll name it clearly: theft. Theft of my time, theft of my energy, theft of my dignity, and just when I thought it couldn't get worse, it did. On top of everything else, I was suddenly expected to manage all the emails from all the branches coming through the website funnels we had just set up. Every single one. Everyone on the team except Dr. Khandir agreed that this was completely unfair. It was impractical, it made no logistical sense, but his ego decided otherwise. And just like that, another hour or two per day of my life disappeared. No pay, no recognition, just more exploitation. They demanded I show up at head office again after bleeding me dry energetically. Another meeting that could have easily been a Zoom call. Same updates, the third time over. But this time I wasn't going alone. I brought my child because he was off from school and I couldn't afford a nanny, especially at the last minute. They insisted. The owner had been giving me a bullying attitude for months. He wasn't being reasonable. It was okay for him to ditch me at our last meeting after kicking me out of the first. But now he was insisting I once again put all my other clients, my work, my life, and my child on the back burner to prioritize this ingrate. The salary hadn't changed since 2011. There was no contract, no recognition, no empathy. Forget empathy. Even basic logic was missing. What a man lacks in sensitivity, he should make up for it with reason. I didn't even get that from him. Once again, they wanted the work of a media manager for a virtual assistant's pay. And still had the audacity to be obnoxious about it. Before I left, I sent a message: I quit. I arrived not in submission, but in confrontation. My child was having a meltdown in my arms. I stepped in with fierce mama bear energy and a fat bismillah under my breath. Their eyes were watering as they sat there timid. Mine were ablaze as I carefully chose my words, speaking matter-of-factly in an angry tone. I was furious. I repeated everything I had already communicated regarding updates before confirming my departure. What my posture stated that my tongue withheld, and that was, this personal problem that I'm holding is my amanat from Allah, not you or the circus you call a business. Who are you to undermine that? I walked out after giving them 2 weeks' notice. HR had the cheek to tell me that due to the lack of a contract, I wasn't entitled to leave pay. Technically, I wasn't even a staff member. No job, no backup plan, but total tawakkul. I took an Uber there, but I was too pumped up on adrenaline to take one back. So my son Gerda and I walked 45 minutes to get home. On the way, I kept thinking, oh my God, what have I done? What have I done? Then I made dua. I asked Allah SWT to protect me from my own nafs and from my own stupidity if I was in the wrong. Because I was so deep in my reptilian brain, I wasn't sure anymore. I messaged my landlord as a courtesy. He came over, and after I updated him, he asked for advice on another business he was running, specifically about his online profile. So I consulted him, eventually offered him a free trial. He's still my client to this day, and I was never short on rent. The following month, another client increased my retainer, and I also got an exception on school fees. The month after that, I landed a new client, offered my son's inclusive school help with their online presence to support fundraising for their feeding schemes and educational support for special needs. I also volunteered with the Quranic Institute I was studying at. I never expected them to become my largest retainer, but they grew, and so did the demand for my help. The best part wasn't just the financial stability. It was the spiritual reminders, the deeper connection to Allah's book, something I wouldn't have experienced if I hadn't taken that leap of faith. The devil rides you when you're angry, and I was afraid my anger would get me into trouble, but I was okay. I was more than okay. I became a better person, a better mother, while growing my rebranded business. I began charging both old and new clients per hour on my own terms. While slowly but surely growing my income, I sustained our little household on a tight budget. I made use of donated parcels. I completely leveled up my culinary skills by cooking from scratch. The kids and I have never enjoyed food as much as we did during that time. There was so much barakah. It delighted and surprised us how well some of the dishes came out. I was more in control, feeding my special needs child food that was better and more organic. I didn't feel oppressed in my domestic role. If anything, I felt empowered by this newfound survivalism, made fun by creativity and new skills. While wealthier people were paying Zionist corporations to poison them via processed food, I was taking my power back in more ways than one. That whole time I clung to an abundance mindset. Verily, Allah provides for whom He wills without measure. Miriam alayhi salam was given fruits out of season, and so was I. It's clear to me now that some companies intentionally push for female hires not out of respect or equity, but because they're banking on something else. They're hoping women lack an abundance mindset. They're hoping we operate from scarcity, so we'll tolerate mistreatment, underpayment, and overwork. It's a tactic, a strategy, a form of exploitation. And I say this as someone who lived it. I'm also living proof that Allah SWT provides from places both imagined and completely unexpected. So here's my message to the Ummah, and especially to our speakers. Stop telling women to get jobs, or that they can. Tell them to build income generating skills instead. Empower them like our mother Khadija bint Khuwaylid, who owned her business, mastered trade, and honored her dignity. We don't need to beg for seats at tables built on exploitation. We need to build our own with tawakkul, skill, and barakah, all from Allah SWT, because He provides for whom He wills. We, especially women, have to learn to be open to receive. And with that, I pray that Allah SWT protects us from the illusion of scarcity and the traps of those who seek to exploit our needs, replace what we lose in His path with what is better, in provision, in peace, in nearness to Him. Let our anger become clarity, our hardship become elevation, and our courage be a means of guiding others to trust in Allah SWT more than the means. Make us like Miriam alayhi salam firm in faith, like Khadija alayhi salam strong in skill, like Musa surrendered yet unshaken, and like our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whose trust never wavered. Ya Allah, write us among those who walk away from what dims our light, only to be drawn closer to your nur. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ameen. Thumma Ameen. The companies prove yourself maybe will promote you setup isn't exactly muzabana, but it shares key unethical traits: uncertainty, harar, unfair exchange, and lack of clear terms. Not specifying a target or time frame makes it even more problematic. In Islam, work agreements must be transparent and fair and specific, protecting the work from being used without just reward. Okay. Recently, we reflected on Asya Houdini, a woman who escaped sexual abuse. SH, a woman who escaped SH within the Islamic NGO sector. She worked in the shadows, building income generating skills that ultimately gave her a dignified exit. In contrast, Miriam Morales' story is more abrupt. Her time and sanity was squashed by a company threatening her livelihood. She had to work extra just to keep her basic low-level income. She didn't have the time to build quietly, so she had to leap. Where are the boundaries? Islamic scholars often say employment is permissible for women as long as boundaries are upheld. Think of the women at the well during the time of Musa alayhi salam. They worked with the right intention under the instruction of their father and within modest limits. It is not work that is the issue, but who we work for and why. Yet many Muslim women find themselves in work environments that push far beyond these boundaries. Some jobs strip women of time, dignity, and even their deen. There's a fine line between earning a living and being enslaved by one. So the illusion of empowerment, feminism exists for a reason, but when people speak about feminism, we're not always having the same conversation. A woman seeking safety and dignity is not the same as a woman trying to replace or replicate masculinity. And yet both get bundled into the same box. Many companies exploit this confusion, pushing a brand of faux feminism, the kind that says be independent of men, be empowered, be free. But free to what? Endless time cards, wage slavery, burnout? Some feminist narratives just usher women into a new form of oppression, one where their value is still measured by productivity, time, and control, only now stressed in equality instead of patriarchy. What did the Prophet Muhammad SAW teach us? The Prophet ﷺ gave his wives full authority over themselves. When other women wanted to leave, he didn't question it. He facilitated remarriage quickly. He respected women's autonomy and eased their transitions. Sayyidah Khadija ﷺ was not a worker. She was a businesswoman. She invested, she managed, she created opportunities for others. That's the difference. That difference matters because independence from oppression doesn't come from a job. It comes from skills, strategy, and sustenance with tawakkul. Why income generating skills matter. Asya Houdini grew in secret. Miriam Morales needed to land on her feet. Both would have failed if they only had jobs. What they needed and what they had were skills, the ability to market, sell, build, and bounce back. The kind of independence that makes you selective, not desperate. Because in truth, no one is independent. Not men, not women. We are all dependent on Allah SWT, on provision, on relationships, but with the right skills, you can choose whom to depend on. And that choice is power. It's a matter of tying up the camel. Modern slavery is real. Many women are raising children and doing full-time jobs. The burden is doubled. Meanwhile, many men have been emasculated by lifestyle media and inactivity. Testosterone drops as they sit in extended adolescence, playing video games while women keep things running. This imbalance is not accidental, it was planned. Trigger warning, this post contains reference to disturbing historical material used to unpack systemic manipulation and modern parallels. Let's talk about the plantation pan. The image above is from a chilling colonial document, instructions given to slave owners on how to breed and break African families. It shows how slave masters reversed gender roles, emotionally froze women, and destabilized male influence, all to produce more manageable humans. Quote, females being without influence of the male image, frozen with an independent psychology, will raise their offspring into reverse positions. This tactic is not history, it's blueprint. And it continues today through media, economy, and policy by separating mountain peaks of the family unit. The system renders women more negotiable, more desperate, more dispensable. In closing, single mothers can thrive, Bethniela, but we must see through the smokescreen. Not all empowerment is real. Not all work is dignified. Not all feminism is freeing. Let's return to our foundations, skill building strategy, and sincere dependence on Allah SWT. Let us raise women who are free by the Quran and Sunnah, not by the corporations. May Allah SWT make us very firm and successful in this as we progress and continue. Ameen thumma ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That's it. We finished with our Muslima series. Subscribe and check out the other three, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.